So if you feel terrible at 5 p.m., your first thought is not going to be, oh, it's because of my breakfast. And because of this, most of us have gone our entire lives feeling like crap because of a bad breakfast, not knowing that they were correlated. Hello angels, and welcome back to the Glucose Goddess Show. I'm Justine Chospé, I'm a biochemist, and I want you to understand your body and your health and food. And so today we're going to talk about a very important topic, the topic of le petit déjeuner, or breakfast, okay? If you're watching or listening to this video in the afternoon or in the evening, you might be surprised to hear that how you feel right now could actually be linked to what you had for breakfast earlier in the day, because breakfast controls us in ways that we don't even understand, but you're going to understand after watching this video. So one of the main issues with breakfast is that today, most of us eat just starches or sugars for breakfast. And I'm not talking about eating like cakes and cookies for breakfast. I'm talking about the very popular breakfast cereal, granola, muesli, fruit smoothies, oats with honey and dried raisins, toast with jam, fruit juices. Most of us, even if we think we're eating something that's actually healthy or good for us, are actually just giving our body a large amount of glucose first thing in the morning. And when I say most of us, it's most of us. So for example, according to the US Census data and National Consumer Survey, every year in the US, almost 3 billion cereal boxes are sold. And every single day, over 60 million Americans eat Honey Nut Cheerio cereal every single day, which is a very high in sugar type of cereal. So all this to say that most of us are eating a lot of sugar and starches in the morning. Even if you think you're eating a healthy granola and a healthy fruit smoothie, I have so much to tell you. And I think you're gonna love learning about all this stuff because it will completely change your life to no longer make the main breakfast mistakes that we all make. So when we eat in the morning something high in starches and sugars, there are two main things that happen in our body. The first thing that happens is in our brain. Sweet taste provides and activates dopamine in our brain. And this is why when you eat something sweet in the morning, you feel this kind of rush of like, woo, I'm getting so much energy, because you feel the rush of dopamine in the brain. Now the thing is, dopamine is not energy. Dopamine is the pleasure molecule. Sugar releases the pleasure molecule in your brain. It's the same molecule that gets released when you have sex, when you play video games, when you do illegal drugs. Sugar releases this molecule. And most of us mistake this dopamine for energy. It is not energy. It is pleasure. But what's actually going on in the little organelles in your cells that are actually in charge of making energy, they are called your mitochondria. Your mitochondria, when they receive a big rush of sugar and starches in the morning, they actually don't like it so much. In normal times, they are in charge of converting food into energy so that you can go to work, go to the grocery store, see your friends, dance, clean your apartment, play with your kids, so that you can do all the things that you want to do. But under the impact of a big rush of sugars and starches, your mitochondria cannot function properly anymore. They get stressed out. They go on strike. They cannot make energy effectively anymore. The outcome of that is that over days and weeks and months and years, you exhaust your mitochondria and you become chronically fatigued. So even dealing with regular stress in our life becomes really challenging. Having enough energy to go play with your kids, to go to the grocery store, to manage your workload feels completely overwhelming. When your mitochondria are broken, you feel pretty damn terrible. And there's a study that shows us that people who are born with mitochondrial defects, they really have a much harder time doing anything than regular people. The study is called The Spectrum of Exercise Tolerance in Mitochondrial Myopathies, a study of 40 patients. And so in this study, we see that the more our mitochondria are exhausted, the less we can exercise, the less we can walk, the less we can sustain prolonged work. So keeping your mitochondria healthy is incredibly important to our health. And so when we give our mitochondria in the morning this big rush of sugars and starches, they get overwhelmed. They can no longer make energy effectively anymore, and you become chronically tired. So this is the main trap that most of us fall into when we have a big sugary and starchy breakfast. We think we're getting energy, but actually it's just a short-lived dopamine rush in our brain. And in fact, on the inside, our mitochondria are becoming chronically ill. But there's more. Time for a quick break to tell you about the supplement I have developed, Anti-Spike Formula. Now listen, in my years of research, I've understood one key thing. Keeping our glucose levels steady is the foundation of physical and mental health, no question. And if I could only take one supplement for the rest of my life to help me reduce my glucose spikes and keep my glucose levels steady, it would be Anti-Spike Formula. I created Anti-Spike with two really powerful natural plant molecules in it. The first one is mulberry leaf extract. And listen to this. In a review study of 12 randomized clinical trials on over 600 people, scientists found that mulberry leaf extract significantly reduces our glucose spikes after a meal by up to 40%. It also significantly reduces our insulin spike after a meal by up to 40%, and it reduces our fasting glucose levels by 8 milligrams per deciliter after just 2 months. So this molecule from mulberry leaf reduces the absorption of glucose in our bloodstream. It actually slows down how quickly starches turn to glucose in our bloodstream, therefore creating a massive reduction in the glucose spike of our meal. The second main molecule in Anti-Spike Formula is a molecule from lemon called eriocitrine. It's the molecule that makes lemons yellow, but it also has a really cool effect on our gut. It basically helps our gut produce more GLP-1. Clinical trials show us that GLP-1 production increases by 17% after just 2 months of taking it. More GLP-1 means healthier glucose levels. I take 2 capsules of Anti-Spike Formula every single day before the meal of my day highest in carbs and sugars. So go to antispike.com to see all the science behind these ingredients, to see testimonials from thousands of people who've tried it, and to order your own Anti-Spike Formula bottle and try it for yourself. It's not just the dopamine and the energy that are influenced by your breakfast. The rest of your day also is. Let me give you an example. If at 8 in the morning you hit your foot on a dresser in your house, you will be able to know why you feel bad for the rest of the day. Maybe your toe is throbbing. If somebody at work asks you, hey Jessie, why are you in a bad mood? You can say, oh, because I hit my toe this morning and it really hurts and I have a hard time walking, right? Anything physical that happens to us, we're able to correlate the event with how we feel during the day. The thing is with breakfast, it's not that easy. Your breakfast will secretly control how you feel for the rest of the day without you necessarily being able to make the connection. Because metabolic processes, they take hours to unfold, they get nuanced and compounded with everything else going on in that day. So if you feel terrible at 5 p.m., your first thought is not going to be, oh, it's because of my breakfast. And because of this, most of us have gone our entire lives feeling like crap because of a bad breakfast, not knowing that they were correlated. So, in order to understand a bit more how breakfast impacts you for the rest of the day, I want to give you a little refresher on glucose spikes. When we eat a large amount of carbs and sugars at once, they turn to glucose in our digestive system. Carbs turn to glucose. This glucose arrives into our bloodstream and creates an increase in glucose concentration in the bloodstream. And when there's a lot of this increase, we call that a glucose spike. Now, I'm not talking about, your regular small glucose spike. Most of us are walking around with really large glucose spikes, especially from our breakfast foods, which generally cause the biggest glucose spike of the day. So why does this matter? Why do we care about glucose spikes? Because glucose spikes cause a few things. First, the spike itself causes inflammation, aging, and insulin release. And insulin release can then lead to a higher risk of lots of long-term chronic diseases. But then comes the crash. After every spike, there's a big crash. This crash, about 2 to 3 hours after you eat, can lead to lots of other very common consequences, like cravings for sugar, like intense hunger, feeling like, oh my God, I have to find something sweet or something to eat right now because I have low blood sugar and I feel like crap. Fatigue. You can get really, really tired from these blood sugar drops, which also compound with the glucose spikes impacting your mitochondria. So the most common symptoms are cravings, excessive hunger, and fatigue. So if you would love to have a life where you have fewer cravings, more energy, and you feel more satiated for longer, glucose spikes and learning how to manage them is a really important place to start. So let me give you some examples of very common breakfast foods that cause massive glucose spikes. This is a graph of oats and honey, a very common breakfast that many of us eat thinking it's really good for us. As you can see, massive, massive glucose spike. Another example, Special K, the traditional cereal that my mom used to eat in the 90s because she thought that it was good for her because it was low in calories. That's a whole other can of worms, and I talk about it more in my book about this whole low-fat diet fad that we had in the 90s that actually led us to eat really carby and sugary foods. Another example, muesli, a bowl of muesli with a fruit juice. Massive, massive glucose spike when most of us are thinking, oh, muesli and fruit juice, that's a really healthy breakfast. It actually isn't when you look at your glucose levels. And then finally, a good example is bread and jam. Big glucose spike. It's pure starches and sugars. So most of us are having sugar and starches for breakfast, and most of us are experiencing this massive glucose spike, and with it, lots of consequences. And so if you don't feel very well throughout the day, if in the morning you feel tired, if you have cravings, if you feel out of sorts, if you wish you had more energy, if you wish you could reduce inflammation, if you just want to feel better so you can go about your day and your to-do list in a better fashion, looking at your breakfast is so key. Another important thing is when we have breakfast, we are fasted, meaning that our digestive system is quite empty. So anything we give it will arrive really quickly into our bloodstream. So if you think about it, breakfast is the worst time to just eat sugars and starches, but it's the time where most of us just eat sugars and starches. And if you're not sure if you're having sugars and starches for breakfast, you can look at my big food classification master list. It's linked in the description of this episode, and it has a big list of things that create glucose spikes and things that don't. So you can sort of match what you have for breakfast and see if your breakfast could be creating a glucose spike. But if any of these words that I said sound familiar, fruit juices, bread, muesli, cereal, oats, honey, smoothies, etc., then you're probably having a big glucose spike for breakfast. Here's another really cool study that I want to mention that looks at energy available in our body depending on the type of breakfast that we have. So let's look at this graph. We have in red the high carb meal, in green the medium carb meal, and in blue the low carb meal. And this graph is actually showing us the available energy for our body over a period of 5 hours after eating the meal. And as you can see, the high carb meal leads to energy being lower from 120 minutes onward than the two other meals. The higher the carb content in the meal, the more unsteady our energy levels will be, and the less overall energy available you will give to your body. These 3 meals were matched for calories. So it's not a matter of calories, it's a matter of if you have a big glucose spike, your body is going to grab all the glucose and store it away because it's trying to get that big glucose spike down. And as a result, your body will have less energy available to actually use, less circulating energy. So again, this ties back to the idea of the dopamine in the mitochondria. When you eat a breakfast that creates a big glucose spike, you might think you're getting energy because you feel that dopamine rush, but one, your mitochondria are getting exhausted, and two, your body literally has less available energy. So this idea that sugar for breakfast gives us energy is completely wrong. That is pure marketing. And if you take away just one thing from today, it should be that. Sugar and carbs for breakfast are not a good way to get energy. It's just marketing. Now let's look at a study on hunger. This study is called Return of Hunger Following a Relatively High-Carb Breakfast is Associated with Early Recorded Glucose Peak and Nadir. This study shows us that a breakfast that creates a big glucose spike will make us hungry again sooner. Why? Because of the glucose drop happening really quickly, and two, because big glucose spikes deregulate our hunger hormones. So if you have breakfast in the morning and then less than 4 hours later you're hungry again, you're having a big glucose spike for breakfast. We should have a breakfast that keeps us full for at least 4 hours. And I know for most of us that sounds completely impossible. What do you mean you're not hungry for 4 hours? I promise you, when you apply my hack I'm going to share in a second, you will stay full for 4 hours and you will feel amazing. Another study. Restricting carbs at breakfast is sufficient to reduce 24-hour exposure to postprandial hyperglycemia and improve glycemic variability. In this study, scientists show us that if you have a big glucose spike at breakfast, your glucose levels will be deregulated for the rest of the day. On the other hand, if you keep your glucose levels steady at breakfast, your glucose will be steadier for the rest of the day. Why does this matter? Because again, I was explaining, your breakfast controls you for the rest of the day. Glucose spikes and glucose dips have consequences. Short-term on energy, cravings, hunger, even brain fog, inflammation, hunger hormones, gut, and long-term on things like your hormones, your sleep, your fertility, your risk of diabetes, heart disease, etc. So if you have a breakfast that creates a big glucose spike, you're setting yourself up for a big roller coaster for the rest of the day. That's going to impact you, and you're going to feel not so good. You're not going to feel clear in your head. You're going to have a lot of cravings, and you're going to be very tired. So again, your breakfast controls you. Your breakfast is so important to feeling good in the morning, in the afternoon, and even in the evening. So my dears, what is the solution? We have come to the solution section of this episode. Thank you for following so far. So the solution is what I call... You guys know I've been doing my glucose hacks religiously. They are the foundation of my dietary habits, but adding the molecules and anti-spike has really allowed me to get to the next level in a few areas. One, bloating. I didn't even know that I would get bloated. With anti-spike, I'm like, oh, I used to get bloated. I feel so much better now. Two, energy levels, super consistent. Eagle energy all day. And three, cravings for sugar. I love sugar. I want to eat chocolate all the time, and anti-spike has given me a feeling of having a total superpower when it comes to my sugar cravings. I don't feel controlled by them anymore at all. It's truly amazing. And I know that these natural molecules are going to help my long-term fasting glucose and fasting insulin levels, which is so key to physical and mental health and to healthy aging. So go to antispike.com to see all the science behind these ingredients, to see testimonials from thousands of people who've tried it, and to order your own anti-spike formula bottle and try it for yourself. Have a savory breakfast. This will solve any issues that were being created by a big glucose spike at breakfast. So how do we build a savory breakfast? It's very easy. So the core of your breakfast should be protein. Yes, it can be eggs. It can also be leftover fish or meat from dinner last night. It can be yogurt, dairy. It can be nuts. It can be tofu. It can be lentils. If you have a look at the food classification master list in the description of this episode, I explain what each of these categories of foods are and what proteins are. So you have a big list of all the foods that contain protein. Why do we want to build our breakfast around protein? Because protein does not create a glucose spike. Protein is essential for your body. Your body will actually keep you hungry until you've given it enough protein. This theory is called the protein leverage hypothesis. And having protein in the morning will keep you extremely satiated. So build your breakfast around protein. Then You can add, if you want, some nice veggies, some healthy fats, let's say some spinach or some avocados, some olive oil, etc. So proteins and fats should be the core. And then you can add things if you want, but the following things are optional. The first thing you can add is starch. So you can add some bread, you can even add some oats, some potatoes, some rice, but they should not be the center of your breakfast. They should be there just like as a little sidekick, because 3 eggs on toast is pretty tasty. The toast is there for your enjoyment and for your pleasure. It's not there because it has to be there. It's just there kind of for fun. Second thing you can add, optional, is whole fruit. Now, when it comes to fruit in the morning, the big mistake that most of us make is to have fruit that is juiced, smoothied, or dried. The problem is when you transform fruit in that way, you're concentrating the sugar and you're creating a glucose spike. I have a whole episode on fruit and why the fruit we eat today is not natural, so check it out if you want more information on that. But here's an example. Orange juice, big glucose spike, versus a whole orange, smaller spike. When you juice a fruit, you remove the fiber. The fiber is protective and helps reduce the glucose spike from the fruit sugar. So you should never ever denature a piece of fruit, only have it whole. And if in the morning you love having an orange, a banana, a peach, some berries, totally fine as long as they are in their whole form. They can be frozen, for example, and then thawed, but you should never juice, dry, or smoothie them in the morning, because that's going to create a glucose spike. And then, final rule for a really good savory breakfast that's going to keep you feeling amazing is just don't add anything else that is sweet. The only sweet thing that is okay in a savory breakfast is whole fruit. No fruit juice, no fruit puree, no smoothies, no granola, no cereal, no dried fruit, no cookies, no cakes, no jam, no applesauce, nothing sweet. That is the core. And if this seems like a big change for you because you've always had, let's say, oats with honey and banana, take your time, okay? If you can't transform overnight, it's okay. Make small changes, add some protein. For example, add 3 eggs before you have the oats with the honey and the banana. That's already gonna help your body, and then build up to having a savory breakfast. That's gonna keep you completely steady. A few options, my dears, of how to make an easy, quick, savory breakfast that follows these rules. So, options that don't require cooking. Greek yogurt with nuts. A bagel with some cream cheese and salmon. The bagel is optional, right? It's starch, but it's delicious with cream cheese and salmon. An avocado toast with some eggs on top. Very important. Avocado toast on its own doesn't have protein. It's just starch and fat, which is fine, but you really need to add protein in there. Cooked options. Omelets. My favorite breakfast. My favorite breakfast is an omelet with cherry tomatoes and feta cheese. So good. Leftovers from dinner, such a good breakfast. Grab some leftover lentils or some leftover chicken from your dinner, saute it in a pan, crack a couple eggs in there, and boom, amazing savory breakfast. And if it's hard for you to completely give up the sweet foods in your breakfast, as you work your way towards doing that, what you can do is have the sweet food at the end of your breakfast, like a breakfast dessert, if you will. By having this sugar at the end of your breakfast, you're going to create a smaller glucose spike. Common questions I get. The first one is about smoothies. Are smoothies okay? And I just mentioned it's really important to not smoothie your fruit. What I really mean is it's really important to not have a breakfast that is just a fruit smoothie, okay? If you have a smoothie that has protein in it, fat in it, some fiber, and you want to add some frozen berries or a banana to it, that's more or less okay. What you really want to avoid is just like a pure mango, banana, apple, strawberry fruit smoothie. The fruit can be there even in a smoothie as long as it's there for taste and you're adding lots of the other good stuff in there. Another common question I get is about fasting. So somebody will say, hey Jessie, well, I fast in the morning, I don't have breakfast. So how does this apply to me? It doesn't matter what time your breakfast or your first meal of the day is. It can be at 6 a.m., it can be at 2 p.m., it doesn't matter. The same rule still applies. Your first meal of the day should be savory. So if you're a faster and you have breakfast at 2 p.m., just make sure it's savory. It's easier, I think, to have savory foods later in the day too, because then you think, oh, it's not really breakfast, it's just my lunch or my dinner. But anyway, it doesn't matter what time you're having breakfast. Always apply this rule of the savory breakfast. And I have a whole episode on intermittent fasting, which is really interesting. So if you're a faster, go check it out. If you want more breakfast ideas, which, let's be honest, we all do, there's a link in the description of this episode with some free savory breakfast recipes, some of my favorite ones, that you can download and try at home. So in conclusion, my dears, we have to avoid making the big breakfast mistake of just having starches and sugars. Trust me, if you want steady glucose levels, you want to feel good, you feel like you're missing vitality, you're missing energy, you're controlled by sugar cravings, you have inflammation that's showing in your body that you want to get rid of, your hormones are out of whack, you want to prevent long-term diseases, you just want to feel better, having a savory breakfast is 100% the place to start to steady your glucose levels and feel well. For a little personal story, for many years I was having sugar in the morning, not realizing that they were causing me not only to be really hungry at 10 a.m., to feel really tired, but also they would often actually lead to worse mental health during that day. I was able to link big breakfast glucose spikes to worse feelings of dissociation, anxiety, and depression that I struggled with for many years. So, change your breakfast. You will feel like a completely different person. To me, it's almost like going through a mirror, like in a film, you know, you're like become a different version of yourself. Honestly, it is completely life-changing. So you want a savory breakfast built around protein with some fats and some fibers if you want, optional starches, optional whole fruits, avoid all the sweet foods. So just test this. Test this tomorrow morning, then come back and let me know how it went. I can assure you, your day will feel completely different, and I cannot wait to hear how your life improves, because truly, if I could do one thing, it would be to help everybody who's currently eating sugar in the morning switch to a savory breakfast. And my gosh, we would all feel so much better. So try it out, let me know how it goes. And again, free resources in the description of this episode. You have my food classification master list to understand what is a starch, what is a sugar, what's protein, what's fat, what's fiber. Super helpful. It's just a one-pager, very easy to help you make sense of this all. Second, free savory breakfast recipes to help you. And then third, I've also put my one-pager of my 10 glucose hacks. So savory breakfast is, I would say, the most important one, but I have 9 other glucose hacks that you can apply throughout the rest of your day to help your glucose steady so you can feel amazing. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.